As the Tennessee Volunteers make their way up to Columbus to take on Ohio State, the biggest matchup might actually come between Ohio State's offense and Tennessee's defense, especially in the secondary. Paige Dower alongside Jimmy Himes. That really has been the point of conversation since the matchup was revealed a couple of weeks ago, is how will Tennessee's secondary compare to, the explosiveness in the pass game for Will Howard and the Ohio State offense. Hearing from the team earlier this week, especially with Jermod McCoy and Ricky Gibson, they seem to be playing really in sync right now. They feel really confident, being able to be on an island and make those stops. When you look at these two teams, what stands out to you with Ohio State's wide receivers being able to win those one-on-one matchups?
I think Ohio State's got the best trio of receivers that Tennessee will have faced.
Yeah.
They're really good. They got the great freshman receiver. They've got Cornell Tate, who Tennessee almost got. It came down to Ohio State and Tennessee for his recruiting. They got a veteran receiver as well. Their three receivers have all caught over 40 passes. They're outstanding. Their yards per catch is really good as well. This is going to be a great challenge for Tennessee secondary, for Jermod McCoy, for Gibson, for Ricky Gibson, for the secondary overall. And I'll say this, Georgia picked Tennessee secondary apart, and their receivers aren't nearly as good as Ohio State's. That's going to be a big key for Tennessee, is their ability to stay with those receivers because they are really, really special. And every one of those guys will be playing in the NFL one day, I believe. So I know they lost one of their all-time greats in Marvin Harrison last year.
Sure.
But, man, they just keep reloading at receiver. They've kind of become – Tennessee used to be wide receiver U. I would think Ohio State could lay claim to that in recent years with all the receivers they've turned out.
We have an exceptional group of attorneys that work here. We're all trying to be better attorneys, be better advocates for our clients, be better people.
It makes me proud to be part of the team when I see how much the attorneys care about their clients.
It's truly one vision. I feel like every single person who works here has that same vision, and that's to treat all of our clients like family.
We've developed such a tight-knit team. Everyone is unified in being selfless in their representation.
The Garza Law Firm. Let us help.
Yeah, Smith actually, though, in the past 5 games is the only receiver to have 100 yards in a game. I think maybe that shows signs that maybe they're slowing down a little bit. I know we see Will Howard being a pass-heavy quarterback, but knowing that the wide receivers haven't had these individual 100-yard games recently, does that show you that Tennessee might actually have success on the perimeter down the field?
It tells me that Will Howard is that's on him more than the receivers. I've watched him play a lot. He has games where he's really inaccurate.
Yeah.
And I think that has slowed down the passing game at Ohio State some. So I think it has more to do with him. I actually think they'd be better off if they had Kyle McCord, who he loses to Michigan last year. They run him off. He's at Syracuse. And McCord had more completions than Will Howard has had pass attempts, which is an amazing stat.
Yeah.
But Howard is he's a more mobile quarterback. That's something that McCord didn't give him. And I think it has a lot to do with that. And I think Howard has run for a pretty good number of yards. He's a very mobile guy. But he has games every now and then where he just does not hit his receivers. So they're dangerous, and they're going to get open, or at least they typically have been able to get open. But I think the passing numbers have more to do with Howard. Maybe it's the game planning too. Against Michigan, they were hard-headed and tried to run the football at Michigan instead of throwing the ball, which they should have done more often. So the game planning, and I would say Howard's inaccuracy, have led more to some of the receivers' numbers being down.
And I think for a number of the guys for Tennessee, especially like, Jermod McCoy, who transferred in this year from Oregon State, to have an opportunity to be in the playoffs, I asked him, has your body of work said enough, or are you still going out there hoping to prove something? He's like, you're always looking to prove something. Yeah. These are the matchups that I think he does so well in. We've seen what he's done this season, I think most notably against Ryan Williams, against Alabama, and then even against Vanderbilt, and how he's just coming up with these interceptions that you just don't think is going to happen. I remember the one interception he had against Vandy. There's this screen grab where he's on his stomach and the ball's just kind of in the air and somehow he gets turned around enough to come up with the interception. So he really is a true playmaker for this team.
Big Orange Pickleball is a state-of-the-art multi-million-dollar facility designed to serve the growing demand for pickleball in this area. Located at 7729 Strawberry Plains Pike, it's one of the premier indoor pickleball venues in the nation. It has 6 sport master cushion courts, a climate-controlled environment, and customized LED lighting. To find out more, go to bigorangepickleball.com or call 865-465-7920. A.G. Hines Company. They've been around for over 100 years, selling building materials since anyone can remember. Ogle Brothers General Store in Sevierville is the best place to shop in the Smokies. They offer clothing, food, candy, toys, locally made arts and crafts, souvenirs, and more. The goal is to pay tribute to the rich history of farm life in East Tennessee and southern Appalachia. Visit them at 1640 Parkway or call 865-366-1485. He has been a great player for Tennessee. He's been a first-team All-SEC player. I think he's better than Tennessee thought he would be when they got him.
Yeah.
And I think there were some signs of that in the spring that he'd be really good, but it has translated into the fall. And without him, this defense wouldn't be as good. And because of him, because he's such a lockdown corner, I think it has allowed Tim Banks, the defensive coordinator, to dial up a few more blitzes and to run some things. Because when you've got, in particular, McCoy, but also with Gibson, when you got corners that can cover man-to-man, it allows you to be more complex with your defensive scheme. And I think that McCoy has certainly been a key as to why Tennessee's been able to throw so many wrinkles at offenses.
And I think how they play will go into our second point, dictating how Will Howard, the quarterback for OSU, will perform. He's only had a couple of games this season where he's not passed for more than 200 yards in a game, whereas Nico's only had a few where he's reached 200 yards. So they're almost complete opposite in that regard. And I think knowing that Will Howard really kind of does prefer the pass game a little bit over the run game, because we've not seen that type of individual success in a game for Ohio State when you get to 100 plus yards. I think maybe what Jermon McCoy and them can do will really truly impact how successful he is in the pass game.
And outside of the Michigan game, in which they were hard-headed and ran the football too much, I don't know why they've thrown the ball as much as they've had. They've got 2 premier running backs. And I know the offensive line got banged up, but that was later in the year. So they've relied more on Howard to throw the ball than I thought they would. So I really don't understand that philosophy, but that's the direction they have gone. And but Howard is a guy that when he's kind of streaky now. When he gets hot, he's pretty tough. But he's a very mobile quarterback. And mobile quarterbacks have given Tennessee trouble. They give a lot of teams trouble, right?
Yeah.
But Howard is mobile. He's a pretty good runner. So that's going to be Tennessee's going to have to contain him. And we've heard Rodney Garner, Tennessee's defensive line coach, say this multiple times. On a pass rush, you cannot have your defensive ends go beyond the quarterback. Because when they do, it leaves a gap for him to take off and run.
Yeah.
So you've got to stay parallel or inside of the quarterback on your pass rush and make sure that he doesn't have any lanes from which to run.
Exactly.
So that's going to be interesting to see how Tennessee does that. But I love Tennessee's defensive line. I love their depth. I know that you look at their sack numbers and they're not great, but there's another number to look at that I think is important. Quarterback pressures. If you're getting a pressure on the quarterback and you're causing an incompletion, that's not as good as a sack, but it's close. Litton's in Fountain City, proud supporters of Tennessee athletics. When you're hungry, remember Litton's for the best burgers and the best desserts in town. Salon Visage has been voted Knoxville's best salon for more than 20 years and one of the top 25 salons in America. Salon Visage offers elite, innovative, and specialized services by highly trained colorists and hairstylists. Salon Visage is located at 1701 Downtown West Boulevard. The Visage Group also has 2 barbershops, one at Downtown West and one at 304 South North Shore Drive. Andros Physical Therapy at Blaine and Strawberry Plains. That's where I've gone to rehab my knee, my shoulder, my elbow. When rubbing a little dirt on it ain't enough.
Does enough to affect, yeah.
It does. So impact, affect the quarterback. That's the whole key to this thing. And I think Tennessee's defensive line is good enough to do that.
Yeah, and while James Pierce Jr.'s only gotten home about 7.5 times this season, he has a number of pressures as well. And I think if he's able to apply pressure or quarterback hurries in this game, I think that would be enough to disrupt and make Will Howard uncomfortable enough to not hit those down the field throws.
Pierce is also enticed a number of offensive holding penalties.
Yes,
That-
not
that's
all
a-
of them get called.
Yeah, that's
but-
right. And that's not a stat that you see.
Right.
But that also gives you an idea of the pass rush that Tennessee's been able to generate, in particular by James Pierce.
And I think, while we're looking down the field, because, Will Howard is so explosive, I think a lot of this stress might actually be put on the linebackers because after losing Keenan Peely, it's almost kind of like your secondary is now no longer your question mark and your concerns is a little bit in your linebacker room. Not that they've done something to cause concern, but you don't have your number one guy out there. And I think, being able to protect the middle of the field, whether that's, Aaron Carter making plays, Boo Carter making plays, I think the success that they can have by limiting explosive plays in the second level of defense could be one of the sneaky factors in this game.
I think so. And here's the thing, too. Good offensive coordinators have a way of isolating either their tight end or their running backs on an opposing linebacker. And Tennessee's linebackers are not great in pass coverage. So if Ohio State's able to do that, then that would make it tough on Tennessee's defense overall and their pass defense as well. But I expect Ohio State to try to isolate tight ends and sometimes you can do it with the receivers, not as often, but with
Sure.
running backs and tight ends, you can get them on linebackers, and that's going to be a big challenge for Tennessee. To your point, Tennessee's linebackers are going to have to do a good job in pass coverage.
They're also going to have to do a good job in slowing down the run game.
Yeah, that's right.
Because OSU has a pair, truly, of really good running backs in Quinshon Junkins and Trevion Henderson.
Yeah.
While they've not had a ton of 100-yard games, they're effective when they need to be.
And what's weird about that is that Henderson, who was the number one running back in the country coming out a few years ago, he's had a 1,000-yard season, but it was in, 2021?
Yeah.
And this year he's only had 107 carries. Judkins has 147 carries, I think it
Yep.
is. At Ole Miss, he led the SEC in rushing a couple of years ago, had about 1,500 yards. Combined, they average, get a load of this, combined they average about 130 yards a game. And Dylan Sampson averages over 124 yards a game. They average like 6 yards more per game combined than does Dylan Sampson. I don't understand why Ohio State's running game and those two running backs have not flourished more. Now, I think Henderson averages about 7 yards a carry. Judkins is closer to 5 yards a carry.
Yes.
But those two guys, they're among the premier running backs in the country, but their numbers don't suggest it.
Right.
So I don't know why Ohio State has not featured them more in their offense, because those two guys can play. Now, Tennessee's run defense ranks among the best in the country. They've given up a few more yards rushing in some recent games. Part of that is, I think, the scheme, because we saw, for example, Mississippi State used a whole lot of motion, moving people all over the place, and it got the linebackers confused, and they got out of their gaps a little bit. Ohio State is not a team that shows a lot of motion.
Sure.
They like to line up, just power and run right at you. Now, are they going to take the scouting report and say, hey, we need to run some motion and try to confuse Tennessee's linebackers a little bit? They might go in that direction. But I think a huge part of Tennessee, you do not want Judkins and Henderson going off. You don't want that. And Henderson, by the way, I don't know that maybe he had a 90-yard game this year, somewhere in that range. But you don't need those guys going off in the run game, because if Ohio State gets their run game going, with those receivers that they've got, they can go play action. Boy, that would really make it tough on Tennessee. So Tennessee needs to do the best they can in trying to contain the run and trying their best to make Ohio State one-dimensional.
Yeah, Judkins has had 2 100-yard games. Henderson has not had a 100-yard game yet.
And Judkins' 200-yard games were early in the season. They were both in
game 2
September.
and 3. Yeah.
At Wallace Real Estate, trust is more than just a word. It's been our foundation since 1936. Whether you seek backyard adventures or a quiet spot for your morning coffee, we understand what makes a house a home. Our agents are here to simplify your home journey and to lead you through the process, whether buying or selling. With Wallace Real Estate, you're getting more than guidance. You're gaining a local partner dedicated to bringing your dreams to life. Start your real estate journey at wallacetn.com.
Against much inferior competition. And when you brought up Dylan Sampson, I like the other point that, while they're comparable in their total rushing yards, Judkins has 8, Henderson has 6 touchdowns. Dylan Sampson has more than both of them combined as well.
Which he's got 22, I believe.
Right, which is pretty incredible when you consider that. And being able to slow down the touchdowns will be important, especially when they get to the red zone, which is our fourth and final point. Just being able to slow down, get those red zone stops, which we know Tennessee has been so successful in that this entire season.
Tennessee's run defense and short yardage is exceptional. It's among the best in the country. Opponents have been in the red zone 34 times this year and have scored only 14 touchdowns, which has a lot to do with Tennessee's run defense.
Yep.
And I think and also, if I'm not mistaken, McCoy had a couple of interceptions in the end zone.
Yeah.
So he's helped
One
in
being
that
Ryan
regard.
Williams, the other being the Vanderbilt game. Yeah.
So they've done a great job in that regard. And one of the things you got to do on defense, you got to force Ohio State to try to kick a lot of field goals.
Yeah.
And if they can, if you hold them to, let's just pretend here, you hold them to 1 touchdown and 3 field goals, that's 16 points. You got a great chance to beat them.
Yeah.
Michigan held them to 10 points.
I believe so.
So I'll be curious to see. But Tennessee's red zone
10
defense
points.
is really good, and I expect them to hold up well. Ohio State's got a good kicker. He didn't have a good game against Michigan, but they got a pretty good kicker. But I think the red zone defense for Tennessee is going to be a key as well. You cannot let Ohio State penetrate the 20-yard line and score touchdowns each time they do.
And I think that's interesting because I think the spread is a little too favorable for Ohio State. Like, I think this game is going to be a lot closer than the 7.5 favorite that OSU is. So then understanding that, I think those field goals that maybe, they're going to settle for a field goal, they didn't let them get a touchdown. I think field goals might carry the weight of touchdowns in this game.
Yeah, they could in a low-scoring game.
Yeah.
But the more often you can force them to kick field goals instead of putting 7 on the board, the better off you are.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine Ohio State kicking 5 field goals and winning the game 15-13.
13, yeah.
I mean, crazier things have
That's a
happened.
cold weather score if I ever saw one.
Yeah. So, we've seen some NFL games where a team kicked 6 field goals and won it. But, yeah, I think that's going to be a key, though, for Tennessee. And now one reason Ohio State's been pretty good in the red zone is because they do have a mobile quarterback. And I think having a mobile quarterback makes you more effective when you get inside the 20 because it tightens up the passing game, right?
Sure.
So if you got somebody that's able to run it, a quarterback that's able to run it, that makes it more difficult. And I would bet you that if you look at the best red zone offenses in the country, they've got a mobile quarterback.
Yeah.
Because
when you look at Alabama, I mean, they really were leading for such a long time, and you look at their quarterback, he's as run-heavy of a quarterback that you can find.
Yeah, look at what Jalen Milroe does for them and what other mobile quarterbacks. Look at the guy at South Carolina, Sellers, what he's done for that offense. So, yeah, mobile quarterback in the red zone, they're really dangerous.
Yeah. All right, well, that'll do our pregame here in Knoxville. We'll be in Columbus on Saturday, actually, and we will have another pregame report where we'll also hear a little bit from VFL Jay Graham and the insight he has coming into this Ohio State game. Of course, he had a massive game in 1996, hoping the run game has another huge impact on this game here in 2024. So stay tuned. We'll be back Saturday to talk more things at Tennessee football and Ohio State.